I'm Ben Spees. I'm the first guitarist, keyboardist, and vocalist.
I'm Connor. I'm the drummer.
I'm Oliver, and I'm the bass player.
I'm the embodiment of death, and I'm the second guitar player.
Exactly.
For anyone listening to this, we are all suffering from the tour plague, so we apologize for our gravelly Tom Waits voices, especially me.
What do you mean, especially you? Your voice sounds fine.
Hey.
Don't start that again, Spees.
So the guy...
How is that tour going so far, anyway?
Yeah.
Well, apart from being sick, all the shows have been really great. It's been interesting. I guess I'll tell random anecdotes that enter my mind.
Yes.
We played Wausau, Wisconsin, which is a relatively smaller town in rural Wisconsin. And we played there 2 years ago when we were making our transition to microtonality. So we had our regular guitars and our 17-note guitars, and we played half the set with each. And we talked about the microtonal guitars. So this time we only played the microtonal material. And someone who was there last time was like, so after the set, they were like, so you guys didn't bring the microtonal guitars this time, huh?
Oh.
So it completely
Yes.
went over them that... and hopefully that's a sign that we're making it work and sound like music.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I thought that it was really cool that that's possible.
Tricked him.
You got him.
Got him.
Is that the last show you played?
No, that was a few shows ago. Let's see, what day of the week was that? That
Because
was...
you just came from Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, oh my god, this is going fast. That was only Tuesday. And then we had a show on Wednesday in Minneapolis, Thursday in Madison, where my pedal board went out and we only played 15 minutes.
Oh!
Got over that hump. Then Friday was, where were we Friday? Kenosha. Just an hour outside Chicago. That was a really good show. That was a show where we definitely drove some people out of the bar, which is something I'm fairly accustomed to when we play to a general audience.
Really? Like that's normal, like
Right. Well, we don't know how much of it was just that we were a loud rock band and they wanted to have conversations. But, but the cool thing is, even though it looked like we were playing to a half-empty bar, afterwards, like, we sold 8 CDs, which is pretty good. Like, all the people who were left were really into it. They were asking us what time signatures we were using. And, honestly, I think some people don't realize it's microtonal until I say it. And we've gotten different opinions on... I've been generally announcing, like, early in the set, hey, if the tuning sounds weird, here's what's going on. It's called microtonality, and we use 17 notes per octave. And we've gotten different... Some people are like, oh, I'm really glad you told me that, because at first I wasn't sure what was going on, and I thought maybe the guitars were out of tune. But after you explained it, I got it. And then someone else on our first show was like, you shouldn't announce the microtonality, because I already knew what was going on, and I didn't need to be told. So
interesting.
You can't please everyone, but I was still figuring that out.
Well, can I ask a question about that?
Yeah, sure.
Do you think it's a good or bad thing that some people don't notice when your music is microtonal?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think hopefully, I would like to think there's a lot of other unique, interesting aspects to our compositions.
Right.
And I would hope that it all sort of combines into just like, they notice we have a unique sound. They may not notice that we have melodies that wouldn't be possible in 12-tone equal temperament. And I mean, I'm fine with that if they find the music interesting and unique. I mean, someone who were trying to cover a song might realize that they couldn't replicate the melodies.
I mean, if their reaction is just something along the lines of, oh, that's a cool chord progression, then I consider that a win, even if they don't realize that how it was generated specifically.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say part of me wants them to notice, and part of me worries if it's not zen enough in those cases. But like, I know some of these songs are absolutely super zen. So if people are just hearing them as music, then I think that's great. I mean, I don't want it to be like distracting exactly,
right? Or
like make people go, what the hell, this is horrendous, because it's still music. It should still be enjoyed. I don't know, what's a good comparison? Like if you made a painting and and you used all this sparkly paint, and people are just like, it has sparkles, and they're not noticing what you actually painted with it.
Yeah.
You know, the whole dish is more important than the individual ingredients.
Like one of our, or at least one of my kind of mission statements with this band is to add all this stuff into the music that makes it interesting, but do it in a way that people can only have to dive as deep as they want to. And so even if you don't understand everything that's going on, it's enjoyable,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you guys have done a really good job with that, and you have a unique sound where you're still focusing on other aspects of the music, like time signatures and how you cadence with phrases. It all seems to be very in character. Like, I love the thing you do where you've got a few bars of something, and then at the end, there's kind of a cadence, and then maybe the cadence uses mixed meter or something a little bit different. So it sounds that way because of the meter and the different rhythm, sort of the emphasis you give to that.
Right, yeah, and some of that is stuff that we've developed in the previous history of the band, and we're just sort of carrying forward because it's sort of part of our style and identity that we've collectively developed together. So, our last album, when I had been getting interested in microtonality for a number of years, and there's one fully microtonal song on the last album, but in the 12-tone part of it, we had been really, I'd been looking up every scale I could find on Wikipedia, ooh, it's the double minor harmonic scale, and then all the ways you can modify it. So, there was still more to explore, but I felt like I was running out of scales. And so, my developing interest in microtonality just came along at a time where it's oh, I will never run out of new scales to play with if we go in this direction. So that was part of the impetus for diving fully into this pool, as well as being inspired by, I think 5 years ago when I started researching this stuff, there wasn't nearly as much cool modern music that was microtonal to find. And then just shortly afterwards, I was able to find the Brendan Burns Micro Pangea album. That was the one I played for the guys in the van, and we were all like, this is the future, we have to do this, absolutely, this is so the way to go. And also your music, the music of Sevish, the person I'm talking to, which is very cool, by the way, was another one of the very early inspirations. We're like, holy shit. No, sorry.
Why?
Well, we're on a podcast. I don't know if I should censor myself for Apple. No, but you were definitely one of the big 3 or 5. I also got super into the Wendy Carlos Beauty and the Beast album. That was a real ear opener. Yeah, I wish she had done more, but that album is really a masterpiece, I think.
Also wondering what non-microtonal music you sort of try to emulate, because I've read a few of your interviews and things and stuff like that, but I actually I think I need to be filled in again on what kind of music you all like and try to emulate.
Sheer Accident is usually the first band out of our mouths when we're answering that.
Yeah.
And we just saw some of the guys from that. Yeah, to back up a little bit, I think at least me and Oliver and Connor were inspired by some more typical progressive music when we were getting started. So King Crimson I still really, really love King Crimson, and that's a big inspiration. We went through a period of being really into Porcupine Tree, which is still really cool, but I think we sort of like moved past it. We wanted to get into weirder and weirder stuff. So from there I started exploring more math rock. There's a lot of 90s underground rock like Slint, Botch, Cave In. So that, I think that, and then from there we sort of developed into liking more and more avant stuff like RIO, Thinking Plague. Sheer Accident is really, really huge, even though we just learned about them in the past 5 years. Now one of our favorite bands.
So I don't know about them. Are they like from Portland or?
No, they're from Chicago, and they have been making music in various forms since the early 80s. And they're just like unstoppably creative, still releasing new music all the time. They recently went on tour with Free Salamander Exhibit, which you may know as the follow-up group to Sleepy Time Gorilla Museum. And their music has a sense of humor, unpredictability, and just like so many different genres. They can do anything and make it sound entirely unique and like something you haven't heard before. So, I mean, I think that's something we strive for in Right Error music.
They're probably their biggest driving creative force is Tim Jones is their drummer / multi-instrumentalist,
and lead vocalist.
He was the one who originally encouraged us to go full microtonal, because we were on the fence as to whether we should do an album that was all in microtonal tuning or if we should, introduce it, more subtly or not, But
yeah.
he said just go for it, commit to it if you're going to do it.
Right, because we had sort of, achieved a small to moderate level of success with what we were doing already. And I was, I think we were all a little nervous, including me, about, are we going to, like, make people completely hate us by playing music that is just really just shocking to the ear? But, we respect his opinion so much, and he advised us just to, go all the way. And so that's what we tried to do. And I think, for the most part, people have been a lot more receptive to it than I feared they might be. There's definitely a vocal minority of haters. But
usually
that,
music
in a way,
theory
that's
nerds,
fun.
which is
Yeah.
the funny thing.
What?
It's
People who
usually
claim to have perfect pitch, which I'm highly skeptical of.
Oh god, yeah. But
Is it-
people who are just they've studied the music theory so much that they're used to hearing these intervals in this very specific way. They recognize that it's out of tune a lot faster than somebody who doesn't know music theory, so they're more bothered by it. Is sort of the
Or
thing that happens
out
sometimes.
of tune.
Yeah,
Based
out of
on
tune
their
from what-
expectations.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
Well, I think it's weird that music theory nerds would hate that.
Yeah, it's very much been my experience. Some of my friends who are like super into music theory and like play like the craziest, most complicated music, like a lot of like new complexity stuff, like Fernie Ho.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing to do with microtonal music. Think it's the dumbest thing they've ever heard of, and think I'm a total jackass for being into it.
I would reverse that. I think maybe the people who hate microtonality are the jackasses, and we don't need to discuss
Preach
that
it.
here.
You
But
tell them.
Preach
oh
it, brother.
man,
You tell them.
Soldier boy, tell them.
But the challenges that we had getting to the point of being able to make this work were really quite significant. I contacted over a dozen different guitar techs trying to get microtonal necks made, and I couldn't believe how quickly I got shot down. I didn't realize why it would be so
wow.
hard, because you're just doing the same work you do already. You're just putting the frets in different locations. But they would be like, nope, we don't do that. We're not interested in trying it.
it's because of like the pre-molded fretboard pattern they have.
Yeah,
It's like
someone
they
was
just print
telling
it
me
out.
that they
and
have to
like-
change their templates, and it's a
Yeah.
big pain in the butt. But once we could finally get the instruments in our hands, and we went through our whole, flirtation with 19 that ultimately turned towards 17. Once we got those in our hands and started working, stuff really started moving.
I read that actually about 19 and 17 in the Unplugged interview you guys did, which seemed really hard to coordinate. It's like really big email chain.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I got emailed about it.
Took us like a month or two to finish that one.
And we just hung out with Aaron in Chicago yesterday. And
Really?
we did an interview in a very noisy restaurant that he videoed on his phone. So hopefully that'll come out. There were like 20 screaming children rolling around on the floor right next to us. So
Like literally, like that's not an exaggeration. It was like an entire preschool decided to just come stand right next to us and scream as loud as they could for 20 minutes.
Oh my god. Wow.
It was great.
But Aaron is a
top
great
that.
guy. He asked really interesting questions, and it was really fun to hang out with him. He's been super supportive of us.
Oh yeah. I love performing with him and doing stuff with Untwelve.
That's right. You performed with him and Elaine Walker as Zia. I'm so jealous of you guys for that
Awesome.
because she is like another huge hero.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, it's hard to beat her in terms of how early she was into doing this.
Right,
And we
Yeah.
actually listened to your remix of one of her, what was it?
Greater Good, I think?
Greater Good, yes.
Yeah.
Just last week. We're really digging that.
We definitely sound like we're making up names right now, but we promise they're real. But yeah.
Well, a lot of microtonal theory we were just discussing is about making up names for things.
Yes.
And then just, you put them on the Zen Wiki, and then newbies are like, what's a Monzo? And then,
Yeah.
Like, oh, you've never heard of that, you noob.
yeah.
Well, I admit.
Well, here's 40 pages of theory. Go read up on that.
Yeah. Hey, I'm glad that you all are making music. I was wondering how you would communicate such things to each other because, like, whenever people make microtonal music, they always have to be on the same page. And, with 12 ton equal tempered privilege, you've got that all right there.
Privilege.
Fret
Exactly.
numbers and interval names.
Numbers and interval names. So you didn't do any notation or...
We
Well,
occasionally
a little bit.
use
There was a thing with
note
Tony.
names, but like for the most part, it's like either fret numbers or like the dots on the fretboard because those are a really handy landmark.
I mean, we're not complete philistines. I mean, we definitely talk about that. We know all the names of the intervals in 17, and I think of it as an extension of standard music theory. We just have the neutral intervals. We have the sharp and flat tritone in 17. So that pretty much, it's easy to name a chord if there's a need to name a chord.
There is an interesting anecdote because on one of the tracks on the album, Arc of an Ilk, we had a saxophone player
Yes,
who
this
is
a good
not
story.
versed in microtonal theory at all.
I heard that. I was wondering if that was the synth because it sounded pretty good.
No, it's a sax. There was some post-production tuning adjustments made to it just because we didn't have a lot of time to rehearse with them to get them to like really dial in on the intervals. Guess who got to notate the sax part?
You!
The guy who hates sheet music notation probably more than anything else. And I ended up having to use basically American Festival of Microtonal Music notation style, which is just write it in 12-tet and then add sense offsets.
Oh my god.
man.
Instead of just like using normal accidentals. Because for all our listeners, in 17, you can use normal accidentals and it pretty much works out except some of the notes equal different things.
Yeah, and it was interesting too because, you realize when you're trying to write, these melodic contours in 17, like you kind of have to use some unusual enharmonics. Like I would
Yes.
use an E sharp instead of an F because otherwise, it would look like the melody wasn't changing, like it was just like holding on like one note with different sense offsets. And that actually ended up confusing the saxophone player
Right.
more than helping him, so I
Right.
felt kind of dumb for doing that, but...
Well, it's all experimentation. And also there's the fact that sax is a transposing instrument, so that
Oh yeah,
melody
that
Oh,
kind of
no.
helped.
to
That
the
doesn't
whole
help.
thing.
Yeah, I had to read a bunch of pages of like just advice for composing for saxophone, so I knew how to approach it. Because that's literally the first time I've ever written sheet music in my life, and I was like, "Why did I volunteer for
Dang.
this? This is
Right.
hard."
Well, I knew that as long as because Tony is an amazing sax player. He's a very experimental sax player, and he has an awesome band called Volcanic Pinnacles that's worth checking out. He live loops his sax, and he has an amazing ferocious drummer, Mark Musselman, who's fantastic. We've been playing with him for 7 or 8 years, and he also guested on our last album. But I mean, he does think in 12, like almost all sax players. So I think what part of what gave me the idea that it could work is there had been a song that Brendan Burns made called Electric 7, and I remember awesome song, one of my favorite songs of his. and I know he worked with a trumpet player, and he just retuned the whole trumpet part to 7/8, I believe.
We actually talk about it in episode 11.
Right. Wow, what a great crossover.
Yeah, exactly.
So that gave me the idea that, even Tony was like, well, I can adjust my embouchure to bend the notes, and I was like, well, cool, we'll try and do that. If it doesn't work out, we can just retune it electronically to get it perfect.
Yeah.
Which we did end up doing some of, because if we were going to do it, I wanted to make sure the pitch was dead on and not squirrely at all.
Yeah.
But I think it worked, and I'm really happy we went to the effort. I know you spent a very long time transcribing it.
I was pretty butthurt about it after the fact. That was so much work for like 30 seconds of music. But that's also kind of how we work in this band. Is like we will spend like 2 days on like 1 or 2 bars of music just to get it absolutely right.
Yeah.
But it's 30 seconds of music. How many times is that 30 seconds going into people's ears?
Exactly.
And hopefully they're going to play it over and over.
Yeah, they better. I know I have. It just seems like it would take a monumental time or amount of time to make all the songs. So are you all sort of like writing it together? Like I know most of the songs were written before Jason came on the scene, but like I don't know how that would work.
I think when we started in 17, I generally have written most of the songs for the band, and then Oliver's been like a contributing songwriter, and also Oliver and Connor do a huge amount with arranging and writing their own parts, and often those will influence what I'm doing. But yeah, once I got the 17 guitar, I just started making a bunch of demos of songs at home, and I would get them pretty completed. I'd say like at least 70 to 80 to 90% completed, depending on the song, and then I'd bring them in, see if the guys liked them, see what their ideas were, and they'd go through some amount of mutation. And then also, I wrote like 8 or 9 of the songs on the album. And then Oliver has one called Interglacial, which is super, super cool. I'm really jealous of some of the ideas he came up with for that.
I actually really, really like that one.
Yeah.
Just the rhythm is just
if
so
you want to remix
cool.
something, that would be a great one, because it's got a really just spacey, weird atmosphere that I think a lot more could be done with. We just didn't want it to like sprawl out into like some 5-minute epic, It's kind of...
kind of a last-minute addition. It's something I originally wrote in 12, and I just sort of figured I could adjust the intervals a little bit to add some neutrality to it and get that to shine a little bit. And then I was like, oh well, I want to do something with the rhythm too, because it was originally just an exercise that I made for myself. I was like, oh well, I've been really into these weird tuplet rhythms, so let's just do all the tuplet rhythms and go through the series of chords and have it be weird and trippy and strange.
Yeah, I think that's something we want to explore further, is these unusual, off-the-grid rhythmic explorations. We've some of us kind of like Jacob Collier. And I'll just leave it at that. But some of the stuff he talks about has been really cool, like using just like having like say the hi-hats going in quintuplets and the rest of the drums are going in triplets or something like that. But also his use of like the drunk beats. Where they're just not on the grid at all. That's very foreign to me, because even though I do a lot of odd meter stuff, I generally have a grid in mind, and it's very helpful for me in keeping oriented. So to throw that out the window and have things be early and late is exciting and scary. So that's something we're going to play with more in the future, hopefully. And then in Oliver's song, there were like all these different tuplet values superimposed over each other. Some of the synths are like gated to the different tuplets. That was fun. That was a little contribution I had. Apart from rhythm, I believe, if I understood your part correctly, that you have basically on 4 strings and 4 frets, basically every chord that you can make with those permutations. So it has all 17 notes.
I don't know that it's every
It's
chord.
not
It's
quite all 17.
It's pretty close.
It's
Pretty close.
It's just
Yeah.
it's a series that wraps around, and I think that it does skip a few variations of it. Like, there's no
Because you have some
tritone
octave
versions and-
repetition in there too.
Yeah.
But it's pretty close. I remember analyzing it, trying to see if I could write a synth part using my, hobbled approach to microtonal synths, which are all in 12-note subsets, because I use Logic and I'm too lazy to figure out how to deal with VSTs where you can actually load full range tunings, and I couldn't get it down to 12 notes. I think it was like at least 14 or 15 of the 17. So
Yeah, I'm trying to get him to use Piano Tech because I like having the full 17 notes under your hands.
yeah.
We are using a 12-note subset for an old song that we retuned to 17. Also, one of the last editions of the album was Iggs' song, Tides of the Spine.
Oh, yes, I love the bass line in
So
that
you can
song.
talk a little bit
Yeah,
about that.
I mean, that one, that was an interesting one because, as we were close to wrapping up, the album, I kind of was feeling like a lot of the songs kind of leaned toward the quieter, moody side. And I thought, if I'm going to write a song for this album, I think I want to, tip the scales back a little bit towards the rockier stuff.
Oh,
But
cool.
I didn't want to go, full-on Cryptic Ruse, metal style because there's, it's kind of a hot topic in the band of we don't want to get lumped in with prog metal bands because that's kind of a different crowd.
Interesting. So, is there a particular reason you don't want to be lumped in with that, or?
We're not metalheads. I mean, look at us. We're
Well.
we're a bunch of dorks from Portland. We're not going to be out there. Well, Oliver could pull off the look because he's got the main going, but it's just it's kind of it's a different scene. Our stuff is just maybe too light for a lot of people who are just really into death metal.
Right.
I see.
Just the metal is all about the shred, and we don't want to be all about the shred. We want to be about songs.
Right.
And prog metal just isn't often about really quality songwriting, unfortunately.
Yeah.
We don't want to be lumped into that.
So I think we're always, whenever we want to get heavier and more intense, I'm certainly being very careful to sidestep as many obvious metal tropes as I can and find, I think we all really love music that manages to be heavy but in a new way. Because, there's some metal we like, but there's a lot of cliches that are easy to fall into.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do something that was, just enough rocking without quite getting into metal. I also kind of, I know Ben really likes to use his looper, and I wanted to force him to move away from that a little bit. So I made sure to write all the chord progressions so that they never quite repeat exactly the same, so that he would have to play it all live. But yeah, it's I pretty much just wrote this really straight ahead guitar part and just kind of plopped it on the table and said, all right guys, you do your thing now. And initially the structure was kind of a typical structure for me where it starts heavy, has kind of a quiet interlude, and then gets heavy again. But after listening back to that a couple times, I was like, you know what? I've always wanted to do a song that just builds down. And so I chopped off the heavy part that came back at the end. And you know what? We're just going to slow it down, and end with kind of a really ethereal kind of feeling. But the really cool thing about it, I think, is the polyrhythm that Connor and Oliver added, as well as Ben's keyboard part. Which, he just, there were some parts of
the
that.
sawtooth wave kind of thing.
Yeah. The rest of the songs on the album all have kind of more mellow keyboard sounds. And on that one, Ben really went with some really aggressive, warm, sounds to kind of match the energy of the like distorted guitars. And I think, you know, the chord progressions in the end of it, you know, they're really chromatic. They're really, you know, almost functional, but not quite. But because they're like super chromatic.
You mean at the very end?
Yeah, like pretty much like the first quiet part when like the polyrhythm starts. And Ben does this really cool chromatic keyboard melody that, you know, I'm really glad that Ben has this gift for melody because it's really not my strong point. I'll write chord progressions till the cows come home, but when it comes down to write a melody, I'm just like, duh. I'm just going to improvise something, and maybe it'll sound good one of the 500 times I play it, and then we'll just learn that.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I feel like, you know, the band really had a lot of say in how that song developed. You know, it's definitely one of the most collaborative songs on the album just because it's also one of the newest. I think the other one, ironically, is the first track on the album, Husk, because that one was like, Ben had kind of a skeleton for it, but like the whole like second half of it was very, very much written during band practice, and we all kind of like had different ideas over this loop, and so it's cool to have like the album bookended by these very collaborative songs.
You are like an edge. Now I'll do what you can. How is that you? You are like the edge. Everybody shake me fast. But help me Everybody shake me fast. But help me
Right, we knew we wanted to do a bunch of hocketing in that the second half, and I remember we went through a bunch of versions of just like making different stroke marks on the board, on the whiteboard we have, and just trying different combinations of you play these hits and Oliver will play these hits, and so that was fun.
That one was really hard to learn too because like the bass and guitar are completely opposed, and like we both kind of have to just like close our eyes and focus really hard.
Like be on the beat and just not listen to the other person.
Yeah.
That's interesting, yeah. So how often would you guys, or do you guys meet for practice?
I mean, when we're working hard, it's usually 3 times a week. During lighter periods, it's twice a week. It's hard to keep up with stuff once a week because you just end up relearning the songs every time and not making progress.
Right. Absolutely, because the songs are so, you know, physically demanding. Also.
Yeah, and we don't write anything down either. It's not like we have sheet music that we can play off of. It's like, remember every single little detail.
Yeah, muscle memory is a big help.
So you're all memorizers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't think any of us are fluent enough at sight reading to be anything else.
That's definitely true. For me, can't sight read at all.
Yeah, me
not even a tiny little bit.
Not even rhythm. I read sheet music about as well as I read like Spanish literature. Which is to say, I can figure it out if I have a dictionary handy.
Google Translate.
Yeah.
I love sheet music, so we should like spar.
Yeah.
Spar.
Fight about it.
But yeah. I think that the album has a lot of great combinations of diatonic sort of like sounds and chromatic sort of sounds. How are you thinking about juxtaposing the two? Because the forms, I think, in the songs also seem juxtaposed with what Jason was talking about with the ending and like trying to take a form that would sound pretty normal and then subverting it somehow. I noticed a lot of that, like again in Kept Man, where like you sing some quiet part and then this giant heavy part comes in.
Those opaque bags of supplies, all of your opaque bags of supplies.
And you're just not expecting it. Almost like got blasted out of my car.
That's great. That's exactly what we were hoping for.
That's good. Yeah. Surprising.
So, I mean, that's probably a simpler example. Another example would be superposition of silhouettes, where it's basically a verse-chorus structure.
Yeah.
But instead of superposition, there's sort of like where instead of a bridge, the bridge that would be in the middle is sort of moved to the outer edges, and it becomes like a bridge sandwich, where the bridge is on the outside, and the other parts are on the inside. So, I mean, that's a pretty simple thing. Like the Beatles did that.
Yeah.
The Beatles did a lot of cool things with song form. Have you heard about them?
No,
they're a cool
I've never heard them before.
Like the bug?
Like bugs.
Or like the car?
Oh no, I think he means the Reynolds.
Oh,
No, the B sharps.
Yeah. But then Kept Man basically just like ends with the bridge. The bridge is the outro. So sometimes I think a way to make a song structure that is somewhat like not totally incomprehensible, but still makes some sense is like to sort of have a verse and a chorus, but then maybe you don't have another verse, and maybe you have one more chorus, but usually we never have 3 choruses.
Yeah.
Or more than 2 verses at the most, and then maybe you just have a bunch of extra bridges that you have an intro, you have an outro, or maybe you have an outro and then another outro.
I Am a Husk has 1 chorus.
Yeah.
Right. I know. Sometimes I forget when recording the songs. I've been like, okay, I'm gonna have to redo this for the second verse, and I forget that there is no second verse.
I was so tempted to try to, and we did try to insert another chorus to I Am a Husk just because. It was,
Did we? I forgot about that.
Well, I had kind of wanted to, just because only doing a chorus once is like, I don't know, it's like...
Yeah.
Which part is the chorus, anyway?
Yeah.
That's another thing we argue about. I'll be like,
to that.
all right, let's play the chorus.
It's like,
what part is the chorus?
It's not a... It's
That's
like,
how I feel about songs.
it's almost like not a chorus if it only repeats once.
Right, because
It's
it
like-
has to like go back to itself, and the chorus is sort of like the part that everyone joins in on.
Yeah.
It's always the same, but then if it just happens once, then there's no opportunity for them to theoretically get to know it the
It's
second
like,
time.
it
You
was
have
like
to listen to the
a,
whole song again.
it was like a
Yeah.
jigsaw piece that didn't quite fit in my brain for a while, but as we played it more, I got used to it. It's like, yeah, this feels right for the structure.
Truth be
after all.
told, it's like we have a harder time talking about parts of songs than we do the microtonal intervals.
Right.
It's like we can communicate about the intervals just fine, but like when we're talking, okay, we're gonna pick it up from this part. Like, wait, which part is that? And like
Yeah.
often
The
like
part right after the
we all
intro
have-
to the post-second chorus
Right.
verse.
Post-chorus, part 2, third repeat. All right, or like
Switch
whiplash.
part
All right, the end of 141, and go.
yeah.
The entire album, Spidermilk, you've just released, is in 17 Edo. So is 17 the way forward for you guys? Like, are you thinking of branching out to other things, or is it kind of the sound that you were looking for?
Well, I guess I can answer
Maybe
that.
12?
What's that?
Maybe 12?
Maybe 12. Yeah, I know. We've
all
underused
different
12 for the past 10 years. So, anyway, some of us have different perspectives on this. I really love 17. I find 17 extremely versatile because it can be made to sound really normal or really weird, depending on what you want. And I find like being able to combine those two is super useful, just like from the perspective of tension and release, consonance and dissonance. I just feel like, I mean, honestly, if I could only write in 17 for the rest of my life, I'd probably, be pretty happy. Now, I'm not necessarily going to do that, but I do think that it really took a lot. Like, we generally release an album every year to year and a half, and this album took 3 years since our last one to put together. We did have another side project we did, but it was really a lot to get the instruments, get up to speed, figure out how to compose, music that would be up to our usual standards. So I'd kind of like to, without sounding, I hate corporate speak, but like leverage the work we already did for at least one more album, but also find ways to expand on that. For example, some possibilities are having and another thing is because we play live, it's a pain to, like, we don't want to end up having to carry around like 17, 15, and 22 guitars everywhere we go and keep them all set up.
Yeah.
But there's ways to extend it, like stuff on keyboard. Obviously, as you know, keyboards can be retuned very easily. I actually had a demo of a song that we didn't end up getting on the album, but it was polymicrotonal with 17 Edo against 10 Edo.
Oh.
And it sounded way better than I thought it would, and that was an exciting idea. So that's an idea where like the band can play in 17 and I can play in 10.
Wow.
Then another possibility is, I almost don't want to give away this idea, but
You don't have to.
live MIDI pitch shifting of our instrumental parts. So we pitch shift like gradually, like sort of a shepherd tone effect where all the live instruments are gradually bending up. I've never heard anyone do that before. If anyone steals my idea, I
Stern
salute
Brookhot
you.
Band.
What?
Stern Brookhot Band.
You'll have to tell me more about that.
But that's not, they're not going gradually up and up and up from a point. They're taking a scale with fixed step sizes and changing the ratios of step sizes so that the large steps become larger, small steps become smaller, like in dynamic
that's fun.
tonality.
That's fun.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's pretty wild. You actually can't hear it for a lot of it.
Then another option is using a little bit of like 34th steps, so sort of like the quarter tones or the sixth tones to the 17. That's something that could also be integrated pretty well with 17.
And then you can jam with Neil Haverstick.
Yeah, and then we might have like a couple studio-only tracks that are just in completely different tunings.
Yeah, like we had one song in 23 on the Cryptic Tree EP.
Right.
Although that also had some 17.
It had 23 and 17 guitars.
Yeah.
Those are some of the most crazy harmonies. Really off-putting harmonies.
I double the melody that's in 23 on the 17 bass on
Right.
the song.
Oh.
It sounds really, really strange.
Also, it being in the bass range, it somehow gives you a little more leeway because you can't perceive the pitch as closely.
Right. There's more space.
Yeah.
And also, like, anytime you have a unison between, like, if it's very close to a unison, you want to just hear it as a unison.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's one of those categorical perception things,
Yeah.
if that's maybe not quite the right word, but the concept.
Yeah, I think part of that is categorical perception, and part of it is sort of how I perceive roughness and how our ear parses that information. There's a lot. But, yeah, I think that's right.
You know, I want to mention something that's not quite related, but there's a really weird book on Amazon that I found when I was doing my original big research phase, because I did a huge research phase when we were starting all this.
It's like picking the tuning and stuff.
Yeah, I got a bunch of old back issues of Zen Harmonica, and I read a bunch of very long Wikipedia pages.
Oh, yeah.
But there's a weird book that is not like any other book on microtonality. It's a slim little pamphlet called Microtonalis, and it's this guy's idea of how to compose microtonally, and his entire idea is just like taking 12-tone melodies and compressing or expanding them vertically.
Oh, no, somebody stole my idea.
Is
I
that
thought
your-
I did at first. But
Right.
that's okay.
But it was interesting to me because it's so different from all the other schools of thought on the Zen harmonic community. But
Really?
and I'm not sure.
How'd you say it's different? Because I feel like that's one of the only ways to Zen harmonically ear train, or even to get people to try it, is to say, okay, imagine so-and-so distance of 12 and just shrink it, but kind of keep all the distances the same. It's really, like, geometrically helpful, although I don't know about composition with it.
Right. Well, I think what I took out of it is just like how much the contour of a melody itself matters, regardless of the tuning system. If you have a similar contour, in some way it's going to have a similar flavor,
Oh, yeah.
even if it goes through more or less dissonant intervals.
Yeah.
Anything that like rises and falls in a certain way, you can compress it or expand it or retune
Yeah.
it, and it's still going to go up and down in a certain way. So that I think is maybe an underutilized or underthought about aspect of microtonal composition.
Yeah, I think not enough people think about that. And the step sizes can be radically different as well. Like, there's that thing that Charles Ives does where there's a song of his where he plays the Star Spangled Banner in quarter tones, where every minor second turns into a quarter step, and then every whole step turns into a minor second, or every whole step turns into a half step. So it's just completely shrunk in half.
Wow.
It's half the size, and you can recognize it. And it's been experimentally demonstrated as well.
That'll be a fun way of making a harmony, actually.
Yeah, and microtonal cover
We
songs.
should try that.
Yeah.
Because the harmonies would all be changing as the notes themselves changed.
We kind of do that in some places. I'm blanking
Maybe
on
not by design, but yeah.
I mean, I know I've definitely done stuff like that, like harmonizing some of your parts. Like, if you're doing all neutral seconds, I'll do all, like, minor seconds and just start at a different place so that, it ends up cycling through all the different parallel thirds, even though we're both just doing, successive steps of the same sizes.
Yeah. There's so many ways to come up with interesting material when you've got a new tuning system and you're doing things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think more people should try writing songs that either line up with 12 or, express microtonal cover songs in some way.
So another thing we've been doing on this tour
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
covering the Imperial March from Star Wars
Oh
in
my
17.
god, yes.
And that was really interesting because, Ben kind of figured out the main theme just, off the top of his head. We were playing it like that for a while. And then
It was wrong.
I thought, I was like, well, I want to come up with a harmony or something. So I went back and I listened to the regular version. I'm like, huh. And then so I tried playing along with it on my 17-tone guitar because I don't own any 12-tone instruments anymore. And I was shocked that it lined up just fine. And I could, in making the decision of, which semitone goes here, is it the chromatic or the diatonic, I could just go off of which one sounded more in tune with the YouTube video. And
Do you think it was consistent, which one you used? Was it always the diatonic?
No, not at all.
Oh, that's cool.
If we had guitars in front of us, I could kind of show you how it goes, but it ends up lining up with Super Pith 12, where you've got 12 notes, but they're not regularly spaced. Sometimes, if you just tried to play 17 on a 12-tone piano and just took out the sharps or the flats or something like that.
Right. It's like if you have a chain of fifths starting from C, and you go up 12 perfect fifths and 17-tone equal temperament, things end up shooting sharp, and so you'd have a 12-note subset of 17, where you're skipping 5 keys.
But the interesting thing is because, the 5th and 17 is so close to the 5th and 12,
it's
if you stick within a certain range in the circle of fifths, you're still pretty close to 12.
Right,
It takes you, you have to get kind of far out before it's that's definitely off.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
But we also, of course, had to put a rhythmic spin on it, courtesy of, Oliver and Connor.
Yeah.
Yay.
That
I
was...
just play it in 4. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Rock band.
That'd be too easy.
And then I also added, the Zenith harmony I could come up with for the second repeat
Dude,
of the
those
theme.
harmonies are bananas that you came up... And then he
and we have a 5th harmonizer on both our parts. Here's the really interesting thing. So I came up with this Zen harmony because we figured it all out, but at the end I was like, it's too much unison, it's not microtonal enough. So I came up with this line and I just had my 5th harmonizer on, and then when I played it at practice without the 5th harmonizer, it didn't sound good. But when I turned on the 5th harmonizer and he turned on the 5th harmonizer on the basic theme, suddenly it sounded good.
Well, no, it sounded okay when you didn't have the harmonizer on and I didn't, but when you did and I didn't, Connor was like, that sounds weird, I don't like that. And then, well, what if I put on a harmonizer? So somehow adding more notes to it made it sound better.
It's really fast. So it turned into a 4-part harmony.
Yeah.
And we haven't analyzed it. I'm sure it's completely fucked up.
Oh my god, I'm afraid.
Hey, could you notate that? I'm thinking of having a sax section cover it.
Oh yeah, and
No, we're
some
just going to have a
horns.
whole orchestra do a 17 version of the one that we wrote.
Except this time I'm going to notate it using traditional Chinese Guqian notation, which nobody here in this band can read except me.
There we go.
Fuck it up as much as
We
you
won't
want.
even know if you actually did it or not.
Yeah.
Oh, and we were also we wanted to put it on YouTube, which we probably will at some point because we have a live video of it. But we weren't sure if we could put it up and call it the Imperial March. So I was like, well, what if we call it Empirical April?
And the first reaction was, that sounds like a Stephen Weigel song title.
Thanks. Sorry, said harmonic plane.
Yeah, that one too. Ironically, I think we have similar taste in song titles.
Yeah, we do, I think.
So I feel like I'm a little conflicted because I don't want to go too much of the angle of just retuning standard tunes people are familiar with. But at the same time, it is kind of fun, and it's sort of a way to get a little bit of attention from the outside community. So
Yeah,
Oh,
it gets
yeah.
people's ear, and they're like, "Oh, this is an actual representation of what is different about what is happening here."
It's more of a reference point for
Yeah.
people who have more.
Yeah.
I think I've also been thinking about maybe making a 17 version of some of the Mario Brothers themes because some of them are the ragtime you feel. It's very chromatic. And it might translate well. You just have more chromatic notes.
And that would make it easy to put it in odd time, which, I know
Right.
Neil Haverstick does that a
Right.
lot,
He
too.
often talks about how the extra notes push him into adding more beats.
Yeah, which is, I think, cool.
Yeah. It's neat when you can sort of connect things in that way and then people can hear it in a really obvious manner, and they sort of understand what's different. Because it's one thing to say, oh, this is theoretically interesting, and like try to convince people, but then actually hearing the music is different. And there's so many cool decisions to be made when you translate something in a 12-tone equal temperament
Right.
and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's like, I remember when I posted like in the memes group that a 15 equal version of the lick, everyone complained and wanted it to be different.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, this is fine.
Or Hotel California. That was like a whole discussion because like that song is near and dear to my heart because I used to play it in a cover band when I was in like high school.
How often do you use the diatonic scale in Spidermilk? Are there certain sections where you're like, oh, we're gonna play in a certain key, or does that just literally never enter the discussion at all?
Typically not part of the discussion.
Yeah, I never thought about key that much when I was writing in 12-tone either.
A lot of
We
tonal
were just
centers in
talking the
Spidermilk.
other night about, like, I mean, even like some pop songs from the 60s, they didn't know what they were doing. They just knew how to play some chords on guitar. So there's songs where the chords will go like C, G, A, D, E, and they're all major chords.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not in any scale, but they wrote the vocals to go with that, and it ends up actually being a more interesting melody because of that. So, like, I know these things exist, and I like to find interesting scales and use them, but never want to feel locked in to a scale, right? Because if you might, if your ears and your mind are open to something outside of that, then go there. It's going to be more fun.
Yeah.
I would say in some of the earlier songs written for the album, the more poppy sounding songs, they were probably just a bit more diatonic because I was focusing on making them really melodic, not overthinking the microtonal aspect, and so it was probably just influenced by the past work. And then as I got more comfortable and confident that I could write a melodic and emotionally resonant song in 17, it gives you the confidence to get a little weirder from there.
Yeah. How did you ear train those scales? Because your intonation is really, really good.
Oh, thank you. Well, I have, I would say a lot of it was intuitive and just like matching the guitar. I did have a little exercise. Now, Aaron Krister Johnson is very good at this. He, at the Microtonal Adventures Festival, and I forget if you were there for this, Sevish, but
No, he Skyped in, but not for that.
not for that
It's
part.
like now. And
We did
actually,
a really fun group
I wasn't there either.
17-tone ear training, and so he kind of used something that I had come up with independently. But that's basically, it's very easy to sing a whole tone. My voice is wrecked right now, but I'll see if I can do it. So like, that's obviously a whole tone. Sure. And then, but the point of this is you don't even need a keyboard. So if you can just sing, squash two notes in between those notes instead of one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then I go back up to make sure I didn't go all the way to a minor third.
yeah.
Well, oops.
Yeah.
So if you can teach yourself to sing a third tone, that's 66.6 cents, which is very close to 70 cents, close enough to not worry about it. So if you can get a handle on those and just like match the other instruments in the background, that's basically all I've needed. What's harder is singing those neutral second intervals.
Yeah.
In a
But I
row,
really
yeah.
like using those. And a lot of the guitar parts and keyboard parts have heavy use of just chains of neutral seconds because I think they sound very exotic. They're one of the biggest things you can do to make a melody sound Zen harmonic and novel.
Yeah, and they also end up in so many different places. Like, neutral seconds in 15 and 24, if you chain those, sound completely different from each other, and how things end up in 17.
Yeah.
I noticed that a lot. Did you all have any particular modes you were using or any tonalities? Because I noticed that there's a lot of stuff in like drop C and like G minor.
All the
things like
guitars, we use a lot of open strings because both Ben and I are not very schooled guitar players, so we like to make use of the open strings when we can, because that makes it easier to make certain melodic gestures sound, fluid and impressive.
Well, I also just love the way they sound. I love the sound of a ringing open string, the jangly sound, the chimey effect.
Yeah.
So, we kind of default in a lot of the songs to having like a C as the center or a G. It just kind of works out that way. Like we're not using like the really obscure keys like like F sharp or something like that.
No A sharp, no E double flat, no A half sharp.
I mean, I don't think since we were this is our first full album in microtonal tuning. Playing in an obscure key for the sake of playing in an obscure key didn't seem like there was any point to it.
Right,
it's just going to be in a different tessitura, so who cares? At some point you have too many songs in the same key, so you might want to use a capo or something. So we can do that when we need to, but I don't think it matters that much. I mean, except to complete nerds. I did have a friend I used to collaborate with who is a little more like you in his formalism igs. He would map out like, okay, I've written songs in this key on this album, so now I need to write a song in this key, and I've used these tempos, so now I need to use this tempo.
I've done that.
Which, it's just a little more formal than I tend to think.
Which is ironic because I totally don't do that. I've written so many songs at 120 beats per minute because that's the default tempo in my DAW. It's like, whatever, 120 BPM, that's the tempo of music. Why would I change that?
That's an award winner BPM you got right there.
I've also known... Oh, did you? I think you sent me once a song, and I was like, "Oh, Iggs is really out there," because like I had to figure out the tempo of the song, and it ended up being something like 147.24, and I was like, "This weirdo, he won't use a whole number tempo." But I think it turned out to be because your guitar was slightly out of tune, and then rather than like auto tuning it with time correction, like pitch correcting with time correction, you just like did a straight pitch shift, so the tempo changed to some crazy irrational number. And I thought it was your, outsider creative choice.
Never. I go for whole numbers whenever possible.
I remember someone saying a long time ago that I was pretentious because I used a BPM that wasn't a multiple of 5. Like, why would you ever need to... 143, yeah. Very pretentious. Come on, you could have done 140 or 145.
Most pretentious thing ever.
But I think probably especially like in the electronic genres like you do, which
BPM is important,
right? I know, like entire genres are like this is from 150 to 155 BPM. So I guess if that's your range, you really want to use all the gradations of it.
There are big differences between the BPMs. 5 is a bit too grainy for me.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to dial it in to the nearest BPM. I mean, the one I'm working on at the moment is 133.33. I don't know why I did that, but I just did that. But I usually don't. I usually whole numbers are good enough. But yeah, I wouldn't do to the nearest 5.
Yeah, some hardware won't let you dial in beyond like a decimal point or anything. I think the new Line 6 stuff lets you do hundreds. It also lets you do single cent pitch shifts, which has been really great for me because we can set up like a harmonizer with a neutral third or like an exact 17-tone interval. Yeah. And that's really fun. For some reason, I've noticed when I play with a harmonizer with a neutral third, it sounds a lot like phone touch tone. Yeah. And that shouldn't make sense because I know that's supposed to be some version of 14 Edo. But I think just the non-harmonic sound of it is reminiscent of...
Yeah, I mean, so 14... has a neutral third in it. It's 347 point something cents.
43.
43?
Yeah. I only know that because for some weird reason I see 343 everywhere. It's like a cursed number. One of the first things I looked up was 7 EDO to see what the third was in between.
I was thinking of 31
because
for some reason.
Hidden has complained about it.
Damn.
So.
You just roasted me there.
How embarrassing for you. Humiliated on a live podcast.
Roasted!
But it is kind of the opposite direction from 17's neutral third, which is like 353.
It's a higher one, yeah.
It's closer to a 16/13 ratio, whereas 14's is like an 11/9. But it's Who the hell
10
has that?
cents.
Yeah.
This gives me an idea for a topic that might be fun to discuss with the people that are still here. A lot of people, I've heard from a lot of people that it's hard to use and hard to hear neutral thirds, particularly in a triad.
I definitely agree with that.
And
I think they're the hardest one.
like one thing I found and other people have mentioned is like if you sort of use it in a way where it has equal standing with the minor and major triads, then it acquires its own identity. But on its own, it's sort of hard because you want to hear it as one or the other. So, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say that matches up with my experience, and I think that's one of the first things that people even do with chords at all in microtonality. Like that composition teacher I mentioned, every time I've shown him something where there's 3/3 in it, he wants me to play the minor, the neutral, and the major right in a row.
Yeah.
And it's so unnerving for people who have never heard that before. I'd say I'm completely used to that sound, but still, in microtonal ear training, whereas I'm pretty sure about most intervals, whenever I'm trying to find a neutral interval, it seems like it's really hard to get it into any sort of pocket, and it's going to lean towards minor or major. In fact, I kind of like to think of neutral thirds as being minor-like or major-like. So I think 17s is a bit more major-like than 7s, which is more minor-like, but you can get tricked really easily.
I think if you use it by itself, it's more major-like because it's so close. I mean, it's only like 30 cents from a just major third. However, once you establish the 4/24 cent major third as a major third, you get used to that, then comparatively, the neutral sounds much more distinct. But, Sean, do you have any thoughts on neutral triads or neutral thirds in general? They seem to be such a squirrely thing.
Yeah, neutral thirds, I can't get my head around those as a triad. It doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound very great to me. Melodically is cool.
That's very interesting with such a range of experience in tuning systems you have and compositions that you still feel that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I know that this is, all these things can change as you get more experience with different systems. And I think that might happen. Same as with the 13 limit intervals. A lot of those I don't really, or particularly the 13th harmonic. I can't really get that in my head. But yeah, what I do, what you mentioned about the neutral third a moment ago, I think is really interesting about how you can kind of hear it as a different kind of third depending on what other notes you've played around that. If you compare that to a really sharp third, then the neutral third has a minor quality to it. And I don't know, it's pretty trippy. I think it's quite an exciting thing to play around with.
Yeah, I really think 17 is a very good tuning for trying to make use of the neutral third because the minor's so flat and the major's so sharp. It's like it gives it more room to be itself.
Yeah.
We don't use a lot of full-on neutral triads, but there is the chord progression at the very end of Tides of the Spine. It starts with a major seventh, and then it goes to another major chord, I think a fourth up, and then it drops down to a neutral seventh with no fifth. And that sounded really natural to me when I was writing that part. I tried putting a minor seventh there instead, but the neutral seventh was really where it wanted to go, just with the parallel melodic motion.
I would say I found the neutral seventh to be one of the more accessible neutral intervals. I don't know, Stephen might have an opinion on if it has anything to do with the size of the interval, just because it's so much larger than a third.
Yeah.
Probably.
But I'd say we definitely use the neutral seventh more than some of the other neutral intervals.
Yeah.
It's used in even in our Poppy song, Superposition of Silhouettes. That plays a very important role.
Do you use it in investments? As I'm wearing a vest.
No,
that is a
11th harmonic,
harmonic,
the flat tritone. It's a big harmonic series chord because it's like a power chord. It's like root fifth, octave, fifth, octave, then 11th harmonic.
I'm wearing a vest. You can't touch me, so do your worst.
It's actually kind of my favorite chord just to sit down and hammer at in 17. It's usually the first thing I play when I'm tuning up, because it's so distinctive, and it's like one of those just great Zen chords.
And it's when you have such a strong reinforcement of like the roots and the fifths below it, like I think in JI it would be like 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 11.
But
so that you have this really strong virtual fundamental, and even though the 11th harmonic's a little bit out of tune in 17, like it's about 10 cents sharp.
Really, 10? I didn't know that. I thought it didn't even count in that they were sort of thought of as 13 limit tritones, but I take it backwards.
Yeah, no, they're kind of like right in between, right? Like,
okay.
Because like the 11th harmonic is 553 or so cents, and the tritone and the flat tritone in 17 is like 563 or 565, maybe.
About right around there. And also the way it's voiced and the way we use our open string tuning, it's the top note, which also really helps it sing.
Yeah.
So I really enjoy that, and that's one thing I always like to show people when I'm trying to sell them on the tuning or just on microtonality in general.
Yeah, I saw you play that chord at the last time you were at Be Here Now, or sorry, Village Green Records, and you played that gig and you did Vestments. I recognized the chord, and then you showed it to me after, and then I heard it in the song again, and I was like, I remember this. That's that memorable big chord that he likes to play.
Wang!
Yeah.
I love the neutral triad. I think it sounds really cool and trippy, and I put it at the end of Diffractions and Halos.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was a cool, kind of hard for me to play that part. I don't know how you. I think it's probably because you're open.
Because
string
I'm all
tunings.
fourths.
Yeah.
So it's just like playing a tritad in a normal. Tritad. I'm so tired. Tritad in normal tuning.
No, it's a word now. Now people are going to be asking questions about it on XA.
Yeah, I'm putting it on the Zen Wiki right now.
I was also going to say, like, I think neutral triad works better when arpeggiated.
Yeah.
So I have it in some of my lead lines, both ascending and descending.
Yeah.
And I mean, it can be subtle, but I appreciate the difference.
You know where
like in the solo of Diffractions.
That's really cool.
I just love that it's a symmetrical triad.
Right.
I love that
Yeah.
it's the same interval twice and that it's a half a fifth.
Yeah.
Just gives it a sort of a different characteristic than you're used to from a triad.
The neutral seventh is also nice on top of it when you're using the neutral third.
Yeah.
But I really like using the neutral third as part of like the asymmetrical augmented chords, because in 17 it's like an augmented chord can be like a stack of major thirds, or it can be a major third with a neutral third, or it can be a neutral third with a major third on top. And at the end of Tides, there is a part where I just kind of descend through all three of those different augmented triads before finally settling on like a inverted minor chord or something like that. And it's really interesting because like there's all these different ways to rationalize, like in terms of JI ratios. Like you can have like a 9-11-14 or 7-9-11 or
names for augmented chords.
Right.
Yeah.
In just intonation.
And 17 does a great job of representing those different JI augmented chords, or 11 limit JI augmented chords. None of the 5 limit ones really work. Although you do have a pretty decent 25th harmonic, which is what you would get from stacking 2 5 limit major thirds.
Yeah.
I think Sean was starting to say something as well on that topic, so.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you guys a question, which was, if I wanted to get my head around the neutral triad, which songs do you think I should listen to, and certainly include, your own in that list?
I mean, I don't know if our stuff would be the best, because there's a few instances of it, but I wouldn't say, I don't know if we have anything where it's really strongly based around.
Oh, I know one. Superposition of silhouettes, where you are playing in like C minor and you play some C minor 7th, and then you play it again, but it's the neutral chord, and it's so reverberant and deep within the sound that I couldn't parse it out, and I was just like, what on earth? That's impossible. That chord
that-
they just played.
Is that the neutral seventh though, or not the neutral third?
There's a neutral third
Okay.
in
Is that the one that like we slow down?
No, it's the one weird chord in the chorus that just like comes out and like it's all diatonic and then it's like at the end.
I think
of the
I think
bar.
of it as a neutral seventh because it's a neutral seventh away from one of the other notes, but maybe from the root it is a neutral third.
I'm playing like root neutral third octave on
Okay.
that.
So maybe the end of the chorus of that song is a good place to listen to it.
So we have this superposition of two silhouettes.
Yeah, so you've got quite a similar approach to me, which is that you don't go in first with all this theory in your
Right.
head, but just kind of feel it out and just see what kind of makes you feel right.
Yeah, and I feel like I generally get better results that way. I mean, I like to understand what I'm doing. I like to take scale ideas as raw material, but when I'm actually writing, I don't want to be too academic about it because, I don't know, I think that can lead to just bad music.
Yeah, you gotta be careful. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but all the approaches are quite valid, really.
Absolutely.
And, you know, sometimes you get things that come out of academic music that are just so mind-blowing.
Right.
That couldn't have happened any other way.
Right.
So it's cool that, you know, we've got all kinds.
There is
of people,
an
really.
old City of the Asleep song that I wrote in 27 equal on Map of an Internal Landscape. I think it's Midnight in the Garden
Hey,
of
I love that
Misconnections,
album.
and all the triads
It's a great album.
in that song are neutral triads. It's either that one or the one in 17. It's been so long since I wrote that album, I can't remember. But yeah, I was like very into trying out like, can I make a song with just neutral chords? Like, I don't like how they sound, but maybe if I put a chord progression together, it'll somehow make sense, and it kind of does.
Sure.
But why am I blanking on his name? There's a composer. He wrote that album. Why am I? It had like 5 songs on it. They were all Randy Winchester.
Yeah.
Five
yeah.
Hemispheres. He has a couple songs on that. One's in 7. There's another in 21, and he uses the hell out of neutral triads and makes them sound really cool.
Yeah. I thought that was a good use of it.
Yeah. So that's 5 Hemispheres, and I believe it's track 1 and track 3 on the album are the ones you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I can't remember which one of them's in 7 and one of them's in 21, and I can't remember which way around
I
it is.
think
But
the
if
first
anyone's
one's in
interested in
7.
listening to that, that is one of the albums which for me was like, I was just getting into microtonality, and I listened to that so much. I love that album.
It's so good. The track in 21 is the reason I wanted to get a 21 tone guitar, which I still haven't quite figured out how to use.
Stuff like that, yeah. Oh, I was wondering about whether you were thinking about how Zen Harmonic, the song was at any given point, and using that as an envelope. It's sort of an idea that I've discussed, I think on the podcast and with other people, where like some parts of a song will sound Zen Harmonic and some parts of a song won't, and maybe you'll have like one section where almost all the chords are diatonic except the one like in superposition of silhouettes. Or you have things like Kept Man that are like really, really zen almost the whole way.
Yeah.
So, what are you thinking about when you
Well, I
engage with
can't.
that material?
I can't speak for Ben, but I think, Kept Man is a great example of using, like, a gradation of Zen harmony, because, like,
Yeah.
the verses are just freaking nuts. Especially the second verse, where he adds a layer of harmony on top of an already very Zen harmonic chord progression.
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's just some crazy stuff happening there that I would have been like, man, that might be too much. But then the chorus is very diatonic. Like, I'm just arpeggiating minor seventh chords, going up and down by like fourths and major seconds, and it's But then it's like, then you get to the end section where it's just this jarring, heavy dissonance, and I think there's a lot of that thinking that goes into some of these songs, of like, we're gonna turn up the Zen harmony knob or turn it down for different parts.
But yeah, that's really awesome that you're aware of that. And sometimes it can be hard to be aware of it as like somebody who listens to microtonal music a lot. Do you guys feel like you're as comfortable with 17 as with 12, or that it's still a lot harder? Getting closer, like,
It's
I don't know.
It's hard to say because I haven't played in 12 in a while.
You're probably more comfortable in 17 than 12 at this point. I would
Yeah,
guess.
That's
12.
great.
I think I dicked around with a 12-tone guitar when we stopped at a music store the other day, and it was like, now playing in 12 feels like playing in 10 used to feel when I was more used to 12. It's like,
Interesting, like, because there's like less notes.
yeah, I'm like,
That's
wow,
what space
there's no neutrals. Like, how do I? How, these scales are so boring now. I just have two types of second. What the hell?
Yeah.
But that being said, I don't think I'm really like super comfortable in 17. There's a lot of stuff like where like my ears haven't quite caught up. Like, we have arguments in the band a lot, like where we'll have been playing something a certain way for a while, and then we'll like try to get on the same page. Like, oh, you're playing that interval? I was playing a fret up from that. And like, well, we've been playing it this way for 6 months. How did nobody realize that we were like a fret off from each other on these notes? And so I don't think that would ever happen in 12. Like, if you screw up by a semitone in 12, you're just like on another galaxy at that point.
What do you think the cutoff is for that? You think like the highest equal tuning where that would be a problem would be like maybe like 15, probably?
It's hard to say.
Well, it's not like we don't ever notice when they're a semitone off either.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
very specific context when there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
If
It's
there's
like
a lot of distortion and quick notes that are like the
Layers.
parts are dissonant anyway,
Mhm.
so
Yeah. That's cool.
As far as the Zen thing, for me as a bass player, it's been a lot of fun to mess with passing tones. Because, within your whole note, you have the 2 extra notes now, so it's like this choice of a passing tone to do either the big one first or the small one first. And try to just cram both of them in there, or like, I would normally do an octave and then like a hammer on that's a whole note, and then it's like, or a whole tone, but I'll do a neutral second or something instead, just as a little
flourish,
that's in silhouettes a lot in my bass part. Just,
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
it's a fairly straightforward chord progression, but it's like just sneak in those little intervals where I can. It's really fun.
That's very cool that you're sneaking those in to the songwriting.
It is weird. It's different as a bass player, I feel like, with this whole thing, because I'm not providing the framework of the songs and not generating the chord progressions most of the time.
Right.
So it's like I have to, support the root, support the chord progression, but then like find my own ways of experimenting with the new colors that we have,
Yeah, absolutely.
and do it in a bass playery way.
Yeah. That's cool. I like the harmonies you all use seem pretty distinctive. Like, I've noticed a lot of what I call linear harmony. I don't know if that's the appropriate term, but it's like in jazz or some other kinds of chord progressions where you have something that's moving in a certain way, like maybe a circle of fifths progression, and then some chromatic notes in the chord just keep moving down by a semitone. In fact, it's what a tritone sub is in jazz, where you take a 5 chord and you substitute it with a flat 2, but you have that shared tritone. I hear those things like in Investments
Yeah.
A lot, because there's like, the intro comes in and it's the descending chromatic line where in 17 things line up differently.
Yeah.
And then this piano line comes in and it solidifies it.
Vestments is a weird one because like by the time the intro is like reaching its climax, there's so many layers going on, and it's because it's so like hyperchromatic. It's like I'm sure there's just if you like analyzed all the notes that are happening at once, you'd be like, what the hell were these guys thinking? This is crazy.
Actual harmony there, because I'm hearing things like unisons, like a descending line. There's probably more going on that I'm not.
Oh,
catching.
there's all kinds. So you got the Ben's tappy part that's there's kind of an ostinato underneath it all. Yeah, and then there's the main melody comes in, which I'm harmonizing Ben in some kind of like parallel thirds, and I think the thirds that I'm paralleling they shift because I'm using slightly different melodic shapes than he is.
Right.
And then so on top of that, then Ben puts another couple of layers that are kind of these like polyrhythmic things. Like you've got kind of like a 770 feeling thing. And then at the very end, there's just like these huge chords that are just like, brr, brr, and it's
just blaring.
Yeah.
Chord. And there's that octave. Well, it has an octave effect, and I'm also playing octaves. And there's a line that's moving down almost entirely in neutral seconds. So this is actually an interesting topic, because I certainly have not analyzed how all those notes in the different layers line up with each other. And I almost think sometimes it's a little bit of a moot point. There's a band called Thinking Plague that I'm a huge fan of, sometimes considered in the avant rock or RAO genre. But one thing they introduced me to that I was not that familiar with before was polytonality. It's in 12, but they will just have, they usually have a woodwind part and a guitar and keyboard. So they'll have these two different melodies that are in completely different keys.
Yeah.
Each doing their own thing.
Yeah.
And at first it's very like shocking, but once you sort of learn to hear each one separately, it's more like you hear them independently and you aren't necessarily hearing the intervals formed by the combination at each moment.
Right,
You're hearing
right.
them as two separate streams. This is something Aaron Wolf has talked about with me a lot.
Yeah.
Perceiving things as different streams.
Time streams.
Yeah.
It's very important, yeah.
So if you're hearing something that way, then, the actual technical relationships between the notes at any point in time may not actually be the main thing going on or the way you
Right.
actually perceive it.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the case on that part of vestments, because with that tapping part, there's a repeated note that's sort of like the tonic, but the rest of the notes almost don't matter that much. I'm pretty sure I could change that tapping part, and as long as it sort of had the same general
Are you
shape.
talking about the
And, like, the
original
mixed
loop
meter.
for vestments?
Yeah, do.
I mean, you could, except for I wrote my bass part around it.
Right.
So
right.
you can't do that, but you could if you could have done that prior to having, it be elaborated on by the rest of the band. But that's the thing, is that a lot of those parts that you that aren't quite so focused on that, I'll use as, I'll try to build on with my bass parts and stuff.
Right.
Like that very initial one.
Which is awesome, and full respect to that. But I mean, I just think the specific pitches that it's more the rhythm of it, the more that they're kind of generally descending. That's more important than whether they form a neutral sixth or a minor sixth or anything like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like if the contour of it changed a lot, then that would matter, but...
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's just sort of an overall building of tension and dissonance and insanity that builds to a point and then drops out. So once there's a certain level of tension, again, it's more the combination of everything that matters rather than someone diagramming that we're playing some insanely long chord name at each moment in time.
yeah, exactly. It's more of a melodic thing. Yeah, I do like being able to hear melodies independently in polytonality. I feel like that's not an explored enough skill in 12 or in microtonality. But of course, in microtonality, it's so complicated already that.
Well, there's definitely a bit of quasi polytonality at least, in Disremembered. the main melody that Ben and I'm not sure if you're following his main notes or if you're following the harmonies, but it's mostly in like the neutral second scale, like blue 9 or whatever the hell the official name is for that temperament.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I was wondering about that because I feel like lots of things would fit into that, but then maybe deviate a little.
Well, yeah. So that's the thing is that
Sorry about that.
there's one part that's playing in that scale, and then my harmony is just a fourth down from that.
Yeah.
So the fourth is a very complicated interval in that temperament. Like you have to go up the chain of generators pretty far to get to it. So to have a bunch of parallel fourths playing these neutral second lines, it's almost like I guess it's not really polytonal, but it's.
I had a hell of a time writing a bass part for that bit because I felt like no matter what I played, it was dissonant as hell and it didn't sound right.
You did really well with it. Like I can hear it in my head right now when you brought up what is Oliver playing. I can hear do 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 do. Right, those chords at the end were intentionally super dissonant. It's a minor ninth, which is even more dissonant in 17. Classic does have that element of like. The second chord change really does hit you with a Zen chord, but it's a little more digestible in general.
It's fun. It's in a fun context versus a really serious and brooding context.
Right. So I think there's definitely the thought of like, how is this going to hit people, and can we warm them up a little before we hit them with the weirdest stuff?
Right. Very cool.
But I think once we feel like people were warmed up, after that it was just a matter of flow.
Yeah.
Balance.
For sure. Yeah. All right, well, thanks so much for being on the podcast. This has been the Mercury Tree, featuring Connor, Oliver, Jason, and Ben.
Thank you for having us.
Looking
really
forward to seeing you live. I cannot wait.
Maybe next time. Yeah. Well, have a great tour.
Hopefully we're
Looking
back
forward
in
to
full
seeing
health
you
by
see
then.
us live.
Yay.
All right. Keep it rolling, guys. See you. Bye-bye.
Disremembered fleeting place, having space but not in time. No time to fetch that member of my mind to store it. Reckon every second for surprise. Weren't you coughing last night? I thought that you were, but apparently I can't be so sure. I'll probably have to take your word. For everything. I thought I swam to Indonesia. Got stung by jellyfish and died. But it seems that never worked out quite as I